Hi, today we will understand what are loops and how do we use them in Ansible playbooks. Basically, loops are used to iterate over a task multiple times without having any redundant code. Say, for example, I want to create 5 users in a remote server. In that case, I don't need to write user creation code 5 times. I can simply iterate over that user creation task 5 times by passing each username as an input to it in every iteration so that the users will be created with the same set of code. Now there are two types of loops available in Ansible. One is until loop, the other one is normal loop. Until loops are used to iterate over the task execution until a specific condition met. The normal loops, there are several types like iterate over a list or iterate over a dictionary or iterating over a sequence of items or the registered variables. And there are several other types of loops available in normal loops. Now let's take a look into the demo and understand how we can use these different types of loops in our Ansible playbooks. Now let me go to loops documentation and take a look at some of the examples of using them. For that, I'll search for Ansible loops, open very first documentation. As you can see, these are all the loops that are currently supported. So let's take an example of iterating over a simple list. I'll take this piece of code from it and then try to replicate similar kind of functionality in my playbook. So for that, I'll create my playbook first. I'll create loop.yml, and as you all know, playbook always starts with 3 hyphens, then my target host name as local host I want to provide. Then from here I'll start my tasks, and here I want to iterate over a list of items. So but instead of creating a user like this, I want to print something in the console. So for that I will use debug module. Debug module is responsible for printing something in the console in the Ansible output. So I'll take this piece of code and then paste it over here. Let me adjust the indentation. Okay, now here I'll just provide it as item, and this item expects the values from a list. So I'll start the loop from here. As you can see here, this is how they are using. So similarly, I will also use here user1, and in the second iteration I want to print user2, then in the third iteration I want to print user3. Now let me save it and execute Ansible-playbook, Ansible-playbook, loop.yml. As you can see, in the first iteration it has printed user1, in the second iteration it has printed user2, then in third iteration user3. So this is how iteration works over a list. Now let's take a look at another loop. Let's try registering variables with a loop. So here what they are doing is they are trying to print something with the shell module. In the first iteration it will print 1, and in the second iteration it will print 2, and then they are registering the output in the echo variable. So let's take this as an example and use it. So this means we can even use this register variable in order for storing the output in multiple iterations, output of multiple iterations. So let me save it and execute. It should have been printed and then stored in the echo variable. So the way it works is if we print, it will print the output in a list. So in the first iteration it has printed echo 1, and in the second iteration it has printed echo 2. So this is how the like result will be stored in a register variable if we iterate over a list. Now in addition to that, we even have with items or with list, something like that, which is also similar to our regular loops that we are using currently, or pausing within a loop. If we want to pause the it like execution of a playbook in a loop, we can use this pausing. So here we can provide some seconds like loop control pause 3 seconds means after first iteration it will pause for 3 seconds and then it will continue with the loop 2. So this is how we can use loop controls. Even we can use some of the additional functionalities in the loop like until loop, for example until. I'm not showing this pausing loops because it's pretty similar to what we did so far, just adding that pausing. So in the first iteration, it will wait for 3 seconds and then it will go with the second iteration. Now, let's take a look at this documentation and understand until. So what they are doing, they are retrying for 2 times this iteration until if item value is greater than 2, right? So um, let me take this value and print something. So in Ansible, remember you don't need to provide name every time. You can simply use this debug module. As you can see, instead of using this, we can simply use this debug module as well. So let me come here. This is shortcut way of using it, but it's not suggested. I'm just showing you the different ways of using it. Now 3, I want to retry for a couple of times. If it failed, even like I can add ignore errors. If this like task throws any error, it will be skipped. I'll adjust the indentation, it should be here. I'll simply add ignore errors. Yes. So if it throws any error if this task, then it will be skipped and continue with the remaining playbook execution if it has any other tasks. So let me save it and execute this. See, failed first one and it will continue with second iteration. Second iteration also failed. So 2 iterations are completed, means it's done. It's skipping the execution again, it is retrying. There you go. So it has iterated for 2 times like this, and first time it was failed, so ignored, and second time it was failed and ignored, then third time it has printed 3 because as per the condition that we have put in, if item is greater than 2 then only it should print. So in the first iteration 1 was less than 2 and in the second iteration 2 is equal to 2, so the condition was not satisfied. So these two conditions are failed, so it retried for 2 times and even it ignored the errors because we have added ignore errors, and in the third iteration it has printed because the 2 is the element 3 is greater than 2. So that is how we can use until loops. So not only this greater than or less than, we can use in many conditions, like for example if my previous task execution status is success, then only I want to execute the next task. So in that case also we can use until with the help of these register variables. So we can use this register, where was that? This one. So register, so we can register the output of a task in this kind of variables with the register module, and in the next task we can leverage this saying like it should be executed until this result variable output is matching to a specific value that we provided. So till it matches it will be retried, and even we can add number of retries. If it is exceeding the number of retries that we provided, then the loop will be exited. So that is how we do leverage different types of loops in Ansible. That's all for this demo. Thanks for watching.